seems to be a problem. And I was asking Kaunga yesterday as we were going in our bus, there was nobody to explain what was happening. Because somehow I was wondering whether is this the land I've been hearing about, and whether it is a reality that there is still a high level of colonization within ourselves. And if there is those organizations who are said to be doing conservancies, why can they do a bit of road for the community? And to me, somehow I kept asking the friends we were with in the evening that, what is happening really? And some of these things, people should bring it up very well, because I think the communities are suffering, and yet there are people who are doing a lot of fencing. There seems to have a lot of money for fencing than anything else, and making the community to suffer. So that's my own reflection. Of course, everything else, going to the community was nice to meet the women and all that. But the environment of how the land system is being dealt with is something to be talked about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's pass it over here next to Madam Anne Samante over here, and then we'll go back to the lady.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think yesterday, as you said also, I think we, at least for us Kenyans, I think Laikipia is the epitome of historical land injustices. I think this is where everything bad happened. But we were discussing, and there is hope. One day we will get somewhere. Somebody was telling me the way Kenyans right now are saying occupy somewhere, occupy. One day we will occupy there. There is hope. Number two, what the lady said during the meeting, that when you educate a girl, you add value to her. That one touched my heart a million times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't want to really emphasize what you've said. Let's pass the mic to our lady at the back. If you have another mic from that side.
Good morning, everybody. Yesterday, what I learned from I can call it a tour, because we moved for a long time. We're just making fun in the bus. As he had mentioned, there was nobody telling us that this is what it is, this is where we're going, until we kept on disturbing Liban. And then we told him, Liban, what is happening? Of course, there was a lot of fun. But the terrain of the area looks like ours. Because I kept on referring it, it looks like Turukana, it looks like Karamoja. So, which means all the pastoralists are the same. And then what also stood out is that the ownership of the conservancy is by private persons. And yet, to me, this looked like it is denying the people access to fertile land. And we realized that when we were moving, we only saw one herdsman who was moving around, taking care of his animals. So we're asking, where are these other pastoralists? Where have they kept their animals? So which means they have pushed away from the mainland, which is very fertile. And I'm glad that yesterday when we met the ladies, they were so happy because of their husbands. The husbands had given them a lot of land to utilize. And this is what we want to encourage the husbands to do. Don't deny the women those pieces of land. Because when a woman is utilizing the land, it means that even you, the husband, you're going to benefit out of it. And I know that the income which is coming out of that place is what is being used for feeding the husbands. And so, and the lady also mentioned that this very income which comes out of the the sale of the crafts. They use it for educating the girls. And we all know that most of the pastoralist girls don't go to school. They are married earlier, but for them, they are now empowered. And we thank Samburu Women Trust because it's the one which has enlightened them. Now the husbands come and ask them for marriage. It's not like they are pushed into marriage. So which means they know that we are supposed to be in school and not marriage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. At the front here, anyone would want to compliment what has been said? Yes, can we get the mic over here?
The road to Twala was a little bit bumpy. And we had, just like any other indigenous community, our roads network to our community is not so good. And when we reached there, we had women to welcome us with songs. So meaning that even if we have a struggle for our land rights, even if we have so many challenges, at the end of the day, we could connect and reflect and get those encouragement from our women. We were showered with milk, songs, and at some point we were able to connect our struggle and our stories again with those women, because my community was there 2 weeks ago. So again, we were like reconnecting again and sharing our stories on how our journey was when we traveled back home. So basically, we really appreciate that the journey to Twala resemble our struggle, our journey. It has never been good. We suffered from colonial struggles, just the way our journey to Twala looked like. When we get there, we had these women welcoming us and giving us a hope of life. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Is there a group that reflected a little bit about the discussions we had here before we went for the discussion or the field visit? Yes, sir. Would you kindly pass the mic?
Yesterday, we left for a field trip. I joined a group on carbon trading, and it's really a learning moment for me. And we don't know much about this carbon trading. There is a lot of gray areas that needs to be explained more, and how little also the grassroots communities are getting from the whole packages of benefits that is given by companies in the Western world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll get also to a moment to get deeper into what was discussed. But before we exit the recap session and maybe have the video, I would like to invite Ole Kaunga to just give a brief, just to bring us closer to what exactly did we interact with when we were heading to the community. And also he can speak a little bit briefly at this point, linking our morning energetic dances and what we should expect later today. Would you want to come over here?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I feel so I feel well grounded here. Good morning, everyone. Siku njema, lakini tunatakia tuendelee vizuri. So thank you so much, and it's been great to have you, all of you, visit that part of the country. Yeah, Laikipia so far is a face of colonialism in Kenya, and perhaps more or less in a context in Namibia. That's what you see when you go to Namibia. So what you saw there is actually an outcome of 1904, 1911 Anglo-Maasai treaties. I think the Maasai are the only community in Africa to have signed treaties with the British government. Kenya and Ngorongoro, they signed with the British to create Serengeti. Here they signed off, they were cornered, and if you read, you need to look for a book a book by Professor Lotte Hughes, The British Misadventure in Kenya, I think so. So that's also the root of the historical land injustice. In 2004, we led a big invasion of all those fences were down. Some of us were attempted to arrest, about 500 arrests. All these police stations were full of people. They had to transfer people to Nyeri. So that was a big thing in 2004. And that was my first encounter when I ran to Loliondo and through Loita. So it's still going on, but we need the voice of other Kenyans. We need to educate other Kenyans to support our causes. So it's traumatic to see people go through, and that's how conservation is coming in through as a way to pacify the history, pacify our thinking. You now see another. Those are private conservancies. Those are only the homes. Oljogi, that was one of the biggest ranch. So it's back to back. If you've been to Isiolo, Lewa Gate, that fence runs all the way to the border of Laikipia and Baringo, where the last ranch is Kuki Galman's, Laikipia Nature Reserve. So it's back to back. Kuki Galman, 100,000 acres. Oljogi, 80,000 acres. So before that, they were holding grounds, outspans. That there was a stock route that will lead from Moyale to Nanyuki here for the livestock. For those who've read Kenyan history about livestock marketing division, the history of that. Lewa Downs, there were several routes. All of them have been closed and annexed into those ranches. So I think we need to talk with the Kituo Sharia to see how we can actually bring a case for stock routes, outspans, and holding grounds that have been annexed. We know them and we have the records. We tried a lot, but also the political pressure and threat is another thing. So I think we need to go back to really activism that really. So we can put together a team of social justice organizations to bring such cases. So that's about Laikipia. And the people are there. During the dry season, they will need a lot of police harassment when they are moving along the corridors. Where is your livestock permit to move? So there are so many things attributes to that kind of. So that's pressure. But beside that, they know how to navigate. They all to Abadeas all the way. There are so many pockets of pastoralism as you come through Nyeri. They are really trying their best. They also been able to buy squatting land. You buy a piece of land, 5 acres, 2 acres, and then you put your livestock there. So you get into Mount Kenya forest. You go to the lowlands. So they are here, both Samburu and Maasai. But also on another note, your money, if you are from Marsabit, this is where your money has been invested. This, if you have been the Marsabit County government, Isiolo, and you want your money has been gone, most of your money has been invested in Laikipia. So I'm very sorry if it touches you, but that's the reality. Anybody who have been through that, your money is here. They are paying leases. You are enjoying your money in a different way because they pay rates like Laikipia County. This is your London. This is your Dubai. You see? Poleni lakini. So next time, think deep and think broadly. Okay. So that's about today's International Day for Indigenous Peoples globally, United Nations, a struggle. And an idea that we have here is we are convening here about 6 different countries, indigenous peoples, diverse categories. So we're thinking we also need to release a statement, a one-pager, to state some of the issues that are really paining us, but also to speak to the world so that our partners, our collaborators can. So I'm working on something, and then before we close and have lunch and then go to, you go down to our office for the rest of the day, we can all of us read the statement and then or even disagree, But I hope if we disagree, it will be genuine differences. I like genuine differences. So we can read it and agree, and then we can find a way to post in one of the. We can ask our partners, TCF and others, to really help share globally, so that it can be one of the outcome of this meeting to donors, to government, to United Nations. That's it. And for the rest of the day, you don't have to tell good tales. Good tales always have their own stories. So we'll go there and see what I say. That's what the Maasai say. You see what the eyes perceives and get to hear what is.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ole Kaunga. We appreciate your deep history and knowledge of the situation on the ground. And I think we've benefited. For those who had questions, probably this is not very comprehensive, but please, you can invest a little bit more time probably to interact with him for more information, but also to read the book that he talked about and the current affairs on the status of these communities and their land. So I would want to take this moment now, first to invite our comms colleague to play the video. But probably before they do that, I would like to ask them to put up the email where our colleagues who have done the presentation on their computers for the discussion we had yesterday, they need to submit this information. The email address is put on the screen. It's written here, UCRD consult@gmail.com. I think you have a better view than I have up here. So kindly take note of that email address. For those team leaders or rapporteurs, kindly pass the information there. If you've done it on your machine, it will be easier to project and for you to make a presentation while everybody is able to see what you have. So I think we are good. So let me invite our comms communication colleagues who've been doing a great job to really capture. And that's what I've been saying sometimes, make sure that you are also alert, because we will see you sleeping in some of the photos. But I think we've been so much alert, and as I said, indigenous people, we don't get tired. We've been really active. So I would like to invite our colleagues to give us a recap of what transpired yesterday. Welcome. That what binds us together.
With my interaction with the women, I have realized that these women are too bold. They've been sensitized on their rights. The women are able to talk boldly, they can articulate issues, and we are praying that let all the women learn from these women.
So when you are late, you first have to pass by the red card and put your fine there.
Really giving people, particularly indigenous people, ownership of their own land is creating sustainability in terms of the economic initiatives, but more important, attaching culture with socioeconomic aspects, of which there will be continuity in terms of how these people will be living, and be able to make sure that they integrate culture in the contemporary world.
When you look at these women, the men gave them 40 acres of land. And this is an empowerment for the women. Because the women now are benefiting out of this land. They are able to utilize the land for cultivation, for making the beehives, which they get honey out of it. And we have also seen that they have utilized this land by making crafts, which they sell. And this income which comes out of these crafts that they are selling, they are ensuring that their girls go to school. And this is part of the empowerment for the women.
I'm very grateful to be here with the Samburu, and I'm very excited from the work that Samburu women group are doing, how they organized. Yeah, they are indigenous people. In Ethiopia, we have also the same community, the indigenous one, and the same women group who had organized like this women group in Samburu. And we are supporting them even in Ethiopia and how they can generate income from their local resources.
It is not easy for these women to make decisions. But when we meet like this, we are sure that we can share the ideas, and then they also go and replicate in their communities. Even me, who comes from Uganda, I'm able to learn one thing from them, and I will replicate it in my communities.
There is a need for national governments to identify the existence of indigenous people and the value they bring into the cultural diversity of different countries in Africa.
Round of applause for our comms team for capturing this information, for putting it in a way that is shareable, for reminding us what we interacted with yesterday. This is just but a synopsis. For those who had a moment to be there, we know what we saw, interacted with, had really a great time. I think we needed more time than what actually we had to interact with the women, the great women, and thanks to Samburu Women Trust for the work that you are doing, and also the translation by our colleague Ole did great. Indeed, they are great women. And leadership, when it comes to women, is really core to our community and our society development. We saw and we were able to experience that leadership from those women. Of course, the experience that colleagues have also shared about how that community, access to that community is a challenge. We saw the powerful facility they have in the middle of the very the distance that you have to cover to access that facility. And I know there's probably a lot of goodwill from many partners to really even invest and support such a community with taking such a workshop there. But maybe the issue of accessibility, access to power and electricity. They even talked about water, that there are water pipes actually that goes underground through their land, but they don't have water in their homes. So that underscores the aspect of exclusion, the aspects of being neglected, and historical injustices, where even communities that have water is actually harvested and taken somewhere else. The issue of access to power and all that is also another challenge. So I think the community that we visited, the Twala Women group, really is just an example of how women have the capacity to really excel. But they only need to be facilitated. They also need to have the political support to have those roads constructed, but also the issue of tenure rights is important. And as one of the colleagues here has mentioned, those women are thanking their men, but it is the responsibility of the men to ensure that the rights of women are also respected. So it's not that women's rights are not their rights. They're actually their rights, because women's rights are human rights. So this is a constant message that we have to constantly communicate. We have to empower, and I was very pleased also to have the men there blessing and also taking us through the process, because also it means we have to carry the men along when we're talking about issues of rights for women and vice versa. So thank you very much. Let's thank, put our hands, give applause to our Lady Jane Mariwas from Samburu Women Trust for accepting to host us and give us a moment to share and participate in this exercise. Thank you very much. So we're moving now to our other session, which will be, first of all, to counter-check how far the different groups yesterday went in terms of having the discussion against the questions that we had asked. May I get a show of hand for those who were able to complete? Group number 1, did you complete your exercise? Yes, thank you very much. Group number 2, did you complete your exercise? Yes, I can see a thumbs up. Group number 3? Where is number 3? Yes, very good. Number 4? Group number 4? You finished? Great. Number 4 also completed. Number 5? Basiru, were you number 5?
Yes, number 5.
Did you finish?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So that means we are actually ready to make the presentations, right? So we only have 3, yes. We only have 3 that have since been submitted for presentation. Only group 3 that has submitted the presentation. So no problem. So for the interest of time, whatever the group that has submitted theirs, they will have their presentation on the screen. And maybe they get the chance to go first. The other groups, if you are sending your presentation as the other group here has their 5 minutes to present, please get your presentation to through that email address if you have intention to use it here on the screen. Otherwise, you'll take the podium here and make your presentation right here so that we have the benefit to follow your presentation and take note, and then you'll submit after we have finalized the presentation. Will that be okay? So that we don't have to wait until you finalize typing and so forth. So kindly make sure that you have used the email address. If you could probably share the email address up here again, if that would help for those who haven't taken note of it, to ensure that we are able to do that. And maybe let us know what group submitted the presentation online so that that can go up for presentation now. So as the group presenters get ready, please note we have very strict time, so to allow us get to the final part of our breakout sessions, which will come probably after our tea break. You'll only have about 5 minutes, and I'll be very strict with time. 5 minutes of your presentation, then we'll option group number 3. And here we are. Can you give a round of applause to our lady who is coming to make the presentation? Karibu. No, come over here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bilach Jimale. I work with DLCI, but I represent Group 3 that was on conservation. And our group lead was Ole, and our secretary was Sophie. And maybe the team, you can see, the team was with Ole, Simon, Violet, Catello, myself, Brian, Dr. Hussein Senior. Hussein is wrongly written. My apologies, Daktari. And then there's Sophie, Arera Shoba, and also Mohammed. Oh, sorry. And him. My apologies. So we discussed so many issues, but what stood out was on the key issues was power imbalance between organization promoting conservation and communities. At the end of the day, we noted that the communities were not aware of what is within those contracts. And in as much as organizations are coming to support the organization, the communities in conservation, the communities are not aware of whatever is in that. That also includes them looking at them as bigger than them, and the communities looking very small as the only ones who are bringing the land, other than the money that they look at it as a big thing. The other thing is the reality and practice are different in that the traditional and also modern way, it's like there's a feeling that conservation from the modern days is being pushed down the throat of the community without considering the traditional aspects of the way they manage their land. There's also, it's not ideal. That one is part of the top one. And then the real value of the land is not taken into consideration. When they are doing these partnerships, the real value of the land is not put into consideration, in that they're feeling like the community is just giving land that they don't even sit on, but they don't know that this land belongs to the community. Transparency in agreement and legalese. This one has been said also by Wakesho, and also was actually talked about where there are those clauses that are not really easy for the communities to understand. And also many stakeholders and their roles are not clear. Their interests are not also different. I think that is self-explained. And then the framework of engagement is not clear for the communities. When they come to you, there are so many brokers in between, and they have no idea. It's a funny framework where they don't understand. Remember, these communities, some of them are not well, they're not versed with the English language, and sometimes those languages. Anyway, that one is very clear. Communities may lose their land to conservancies. There was that fear. This is self-explanatory. They're looking at what are the alternatives. What do these communities have as an alternative? And then there's inadequate benefit sharing of resources. I'm imagining even with the climate change, I'm not jumping into the climate, what is it called? The markets, where they are selling killens, air. That's what my people call it, killens. So in that market where they discuss benefit sharing, the benefit was higher for the communities, but now it has gone down. Meaning, even in this sharing, when they're doing the sharing of the resources, it's not, the communities are not privy to this information, and if they're privy to the information, they are given less amount of money out of it. And also conservation has brought conflict in that some community members want conservation, some communities do not want conservation. That has brought an internal conflict within the communities as well as also the neighbors. Next slide. Sorry. Next slide. Solution, we're looking at African modern conservation, the indigenous way. We have to come up with one. And then there's also strengthening of FPIC, free prior informed consent as a process. And there's also the pushing for advocating for community land registration. If the communities owned the land, when you're coming to the table to discuss, then the communities will be able to, will have an upper hand. They don't feel like the small person within that partnership. And then there's documenting what works for IPLC's way of conservation, what works, what doesn't work. So those are the other things. Capacity strengthening of communities, in that we have to strengthen the communities to understand how to look into those negotiations. This also means that we strengthen paralegals and also strengthening the networks that we have on ground. Let them understand the law. Let them be able to understand what is in those documents. And then there is fair negotiation when leasing land for conservation. That is self-explanatory. Next. Priority support needed. Facilitate community land registration. That is also includes not only registration of the land itself, but also after registration, which is contained in the law. That is what do they want to do with their land? Them. And then the support for cooperation agreements. I think that is very clear, but if you have a question, you can ask. And then the other one, I have 2 minutes. The other one is change our approach in how we do learning. We should find a way of sitting together with the communities and making sure that we understand what they want and what has worked, what they want, what needs to be done in future. Next. Networks, identifying our expertise and sharing the same amongst ourselves. Actually, when sitting down in that group, we noted that we all had our strength, and I'm imagining all of us coming together, we can form a very formidable group. And then there's build a network of passionate people and shared resources who can co-create projects with communities. Ole actually clearly said that it's good to go sit down with the communities, take some time, get to know what they want to do as a project, what is their priorities, then come up with a project. Instead of us thinking for them, this is what is needed. And then there's what is best practice that the network is trying to build on. Define this network and work towards it. Aligning our values. Everyone has different values, but it's good for us to align our values and make sure that we work together. Support each other and be tolerant. I guess it's related to the upper one. Look for flexible funding that will be able to accommodate the indigenous communities. Thank you, and I thank my comms team from Nairobi for the work.
Can you give them another round of applause? Thank you very much. That was good timing. You only missed it by a minute or two. But let's open it up to the group members. Did this presentation cover comprehensively what you discussed, or are there any additions or issues that were missed that you would like to bring to our attention or have them added into that presentation? Members, do you agree that was good? Any addition? Simon, were you in the group? So would you want to add something? And please, I don't want a clarification. I'm asking if there's anything missing. Only if anything missing or not articulated or fully addressed. For now, no addition in terms of elaborating. Great. Other members that were not part of this group. The presentation has captured what the members discussed. Please keep the slides up. Any addition or issue, and I know there will be a potential serious overlap with the presentation on carbon and maybe other items, and I see people nodding. So likely I allow, if possible, the presentation for the carbon probably to go first and then tie the two and allow for questions. Will that be a good idea? So that was group number? Was group number 2, right? Do we have the presentation for group number 2? No, this one was the one that was presented was group number 3. So I want to put it to group number 2. So number 2 is not in. Please check group number 2. I want to tie them particularly to inform the conversation. Yes, let's have group number 2. And then we can tie the two and maybe take the questions. There will be quite some strings that runs through, which you have to take into account. But as we wait for number 2 to go up, there are a few points that I want us to quickly reflect on, or maybe just pay attention to, which also will lead us to the next conversation. I think the solutions you've posted here are very good, but then it's how do we do them practically? You know, how and what is it that you would want to ask more practically that goes beyond the general to the specifics about the partnership here and what you will be asking of the Christensen Fund, but also of other partners within this convening, but also other spaces. So if we are good, we can put the slide. Oh, group number 2. Who is the presenter? Oh, he's right here. Okay, the floor is yours, and kindly observe time. I know you have. You may want to explain a lot of things, but I'll be strict. Yes. So please observe time.
Thank you so much. Group members, please raise your hand. Group 2. I can't. There they are. For this group, yes, we discussed about carbon trading and climate change. The first bit is we reflected on these key issues, and one thing that we said, and it was said even yesterday, is that carbon trading is a reality that is with us. We can't escape it, for sure. So the thing is, how do we face it, and how can we engage with it? And the underlying issues around community understanding of carbon trading is the main thing we need to understand. And as it's been said, it cuts across even with conservation. We have to understand what is it that we are interacting with. And for carbon also, there are different mechanisms of trading. And it's difficult for us to know who decides what. Where does the trading take place? Who are the proponents? Who are the financiers? Complexity in the business is something else. And the general fundamental issue that is a flow, and it also cuts across, I think, for various issues that affect us, including conservation, is how these ideas are conceptualized. With carbon, the main thing that you hear is pastoralist lands are degraded, number 1. And there's no data provided for that, no references. It's like a given thing. And then the second bit is management of these lands are not there. So that is the frame within which this thing works. And that is what discounts our land, and also it disrupts valuation of our land, because our land is viewed as wasteland. Next slide, please. Methodological issues. As I said, it's complex. Technicalities of measuring, and especially in this environment, which is highly variable. There are a lot of questions around that. Lack of transparency is quite central. Proponents do not really disclose the contracts. Government, which are the people supposed to be protecting our rights, are absent in this game. And so we have contracts that are not disclosed, and benefits that we don't know about that just come from the air and it's given to us like freebies, and people think it's free money just comes from the air. Proper yeah, that's mentioned, and then the trainer rights cuts across. Government is deeply interested in this, and here we see where revenue seeking by governments overrides the rights of the people, and this is something also quite central to others. Expert support is also lacking. Next, please. Therefore, in terms of solutions, this was also mentioned, we need a movement, definitely, because in this room, we have people from different countries, from different groups, and our issues are quite common. Our communities really need to get aware of the issues at hand. Our lands needs to be registered, and for not only for carbon, but for different other things that are affecting us. Contracts needs to be disclosed, and that has been said as well also. We also need evidence-based advocacy as a team that supports the communities. And frameworks like the Climate Change Adaptation Act in Kenya needs to be really looked into. It doesn't seem to really cover our interest, and expert support to understand these issues is also critical. Further also, when talking about carbon, our starting point has to be, it has to be built on sustainable pastoralism. It should not be thought that carbon or even other initiatives like conservation are here to replace pastoralism, and of course they can't. FPIC was mentioned, I don't need to repeat it, and these narratives that underwrites pastoralism and our livelihoods has to be really countered, and it has to be countered with knowledge and information. Then the element around poverty and manipulation. One issue that is at hand is people are saying, yes, we want to rethink about this, but we might lose this money. What do we do? And so this is the manipulation that is at the center of all this that needs to be looked into. Next, please. In terms of priorities, areas of support, which is a bit repetitive of what we said, we need support in terms of this understanding. How do we make sustainable pastoralism to be at the center of carbon trading frameworks? Then there's need for policy or a guide that helps indigenous communities to interact with investors, with proponents and financiers of these projects. There's also need for us to build, and train a movement of a movement and within which paralegal network works, and also have networks of pastoralist researchers who provide knowledge and evidence. Public awareness and education for our communities is also prime. Next, please. And quickly, because my time is up, I see it on my screen. Investment in indigenous companies, because we rely on external companies for all the processes involved with carbon, is important. I think the guide I have mentioned also that is a repeated one. And expert support, definitely, on all these technical issues from the start, to the end. And in terms of proposed ideas for network, we didn't get time to discuss a lot about this, but we said there are networks that are out there that are working. How can we learn from other regions and have a network that works for us in our context? So thank you so much.
Let's not be mean. These guys have done very well too. Can you give them a round of applause? Now, let's give justice to these two presentations and open it up for a quick reflection. But first, are the members of the group satisfied with the presentation? Very good. So I want to take his first input. So we are opening the floor first to discuss the two presentations. So let's make reference to the conversation, the presentation that has since been presented here. What input do you have? How much do you agree? What is that has been missed that we want to add? Anything that you would like to complement? You have to be brief in your response or your question. If at all you have any specific question, please also use this moment to put your question in. So I would want to start with Simon in front here. Kindly pass the mic if someone has it. The gentleman in front here. Yes, there's a mic over here. And let's be on standby for any additional inputs. For colleagues or members who participated in either of the groups, you also have the opportunity, but I would want to hear more from those who are not members of the group, because there are risk of repeating what you've already presented if you are members of the same group. But I want to give you a moment to say something. Bwana Simon, please.
Okay, thank you. There's just one thing that I felt like it did not probably come very well from our group. This is in relation to supporting communities to register their land. Maybe one of the reasons why it could not come clearly could be due to current laws, land laws that we have in the country. The issue is that, we had kind of thought that instead of pastoralists just giving the land to the investors or the so-called investors or these, people who are in this business, one way of ensuring that we don't lose the land is if pastoralists, for example, have already registered their land and they have got legal document to that, then the aspect of leasing land to these, agencies could be one of them. Such that, in the lease agreements, you specify the time that the conservancies, for example, are going to use the land. And that agreement, it can be 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, such that in the event that the pastoralists, feel like, I think enough is enough, they should have the possibility, the position to revert the land back to them. That's just what I felt like it was not coming out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think your point underscores the importance of having also the legal recognition of that land, so that you're able to enter into a legal agreement and be able, whether this is communally owned and you have the power to do that. I see a hand goes up. I think you are also a member of the group that presented. Are there members of the group that did not present? But let's pass the mic to the gentleman before we can hear from the rest. Members, let's be attentive. Let's be attentive, because this is the core of the information that will help us get to the next level. And I would want your inputs to what these groups have discussed, because you may not have had the chance to be part of their discussion. They might have fully represented your opinion, but in the event something is missed, this is the moment to plug it in. Thank you. Proceed.
Okay, I was in group 3, and where we discussed the issue of conservation. And what we realized that, and I think we never captured, because there is element of conflicts when a given projects come to our land. The community tend to, there's a lot of division on to support the project and not to support the project. And we say that we need to have a conflict resolution committee among us, the community, because that project will come, stay for 10 years and goes. And the community will just remain on the same land. So a resolution, conflict resolution committee are important for us to stay in harmony going forward. There's this element of FPIC. FPIC, the free, prior, and informed consent, is a tool whereby when people do not understand a given project come to their land, it bring a lot of problem going forward. So capacity buildings on FPIC should be dealt accordingly, so that people will not be living in a mess. Thank you.
Thank you. Pass the mic right behind you, the gentleman. And ladies, where are you? Are you asleep, or where are the ladies?
Yeah.
I need to feel you where you feel the ladies' voices in the room. Yes, gentlemen, please proceed.
Yes, I am a member of Group 2. I just wanted to add one point that did not come out that we discussed, was to develop or rent local satellite technology to reduce reliance on external satellites for carbon projects. I was saying that there is a point that we wanted to add from Group 3 is to develop or rent local satellite technology for these carbon projects. Thank you.
Just allow me to paraphrase what you said. So the technology on weather satellite is more like embracing technology to support us in the work on conservation as well as what happens in our community?
Yes.
Okay. Ladies, where are you? I'm watching. So let me see who I give the mic to. Our Mzee Hussein here. There's a mic right to him.
Thank you. I was on in group that on conservation, and when we ask, is there an alternative? The problem is again shown there as power relations and mistrust, lack of not just participation but actually community driving things, processes. So was suggested, and the many people must have done before, that unless community conservation comes from, conservation of nature comes from within, from the ground up, so that, a conservation that is based on our knowledge and our age, time from time immemorial of conserving nature directly or indirectly, so that we create at our level here, because we have weak traditional conservation ideas on the ground. But we are familiar now with what goes on in the world, whether it's done from levels of ICN or local NGOs here that are trying to do it. If we do it ourselves, then there's no danger of losing our land, first of all. Number two, support that comes from outside comes directly to the community, because our problem currently is fighting over power and decision-making, power over money that comes in. That doesn't reach the ground. Number two, the future of what is done on the ground, future is dependent on the future of the NGO that's running it. But if we do it ourselves, long term, as part of our life, as part of coexistence with nature, because we are part of nature, that at our level here, we create some kind of template that each community can domesticate, and then they can market it. It's like the carbon trade, where you have got the buyer, who are the funders, you have the seller, the community, and the proponent, which is us. We propose, we help develop a template that each community can develop, and using their culture and the landscape, they can do culture and community specific conservation activities. If you bring something broad to all communities, the formula doesn't work, because we have different way of doing things, each of us. Thank you.
Let me go to the ladies first, now that I'm seeing some more gentlemen putting up their hand. So I go to Anne for your intervention, and then I'll give the gentleman here, and then you, and then you'll be the final speaker for that particular session. Can you pass the mic, kindly? To Anne.
Okay, thank you, Madam Moderator. And my input is, I think that was group 2 on carbon, just a little input. I think they captured very well the issues and also the proposed solutions. But I know I saw one point where they talked of research, indigenous peoples to do their own research. I think there is also need to bring on board indigenous peoples' legal experts. I believe we have lawyers as indigenous peoples. We are better off talking for ourselves. So I think carbon has provided a specimen that we must engage our own legal lawyers for purposes of course, we know there are a lot of legal technicalities in the carbon market space. So we can even have a network or a group, a caucus of indigenous people's legal experts. On networking, and I think we need to be very active in participating in ongoing regional processes when it comes to carbon. I was happy the other day when Aileen said that he get crashed to some conference on carbon. in February, no, about I think 1 month ago, I was in the Carbon Summit, Carbon Conference in Addis, and I think if we find ourselves there, I managed to push the voice of indigenous people. Let me tell you, in these spaces, as big as they look, it's African something, they don't talk about us if we are not there. So we must be very alert to make sure that we are not left out at the regional spaces or at the regional dialogue. Then someone talked about the grievance redress mechanism. I think, yes, that is definitely, it was missing, and it is very important because anytime we are talking of resources, then there's bound to be a lot of conflict. But I think the most important thing as well, and in addition to that, is to apply the traditional or customary justice system. We had, because this other one can be too expensive, as much as we know that our rights have been taken away or we have a case to present, sometimes we may not have the resources. So we should push for inclusion of the customary justice system into the whole process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think your points are very clear. Before I come to you, Ole, let me pick this gentleman here. Kindly pass the mic quickly. Pass the mic, pass the mic. And kindly be brief, eh?
Yeah, I will be very brief because I was part of Group 2. And something that came out, I think, talked about research and building the network. And we said one of the key assignments of this network is that if you look at the standards, both for measuring and verification of carbon credits, they are all non-indigenous people driven. They are done, the scientists that do this, even if probably they are indigenous people who are working in these organizations, they are doing it in favor of the proponents and the marketers. If possible, then this network can come up with a team of scientists, verifiers, and do local or indigenous people-led verification for this carbon trading. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I pass it over to the gentleman and then to Ole. I see the other interest party probably having a conversation behind there. So can you pass the mic, please?
I wanted to do it myself.
Are you doing it on behalf of someone? No.
No, I just have one.
Kindly, very brief.
Okay. Okay. I don't want to labor a lot what our group and others have already said, but in terms of fundraising, we need to have a consortium kind of, because if we just say we leave to individual organization, we'll be doing our own things. So if we have a resource that can support the community to spearhead some of those things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. Kindly pass the mic to the gentleman there. And if you have another mic, you can pass it over here to Ole so that we are able to save time. Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you. To me, two things. One, the word conservation itself. I think as indigenous people now we need to have our own word to define about the conservation, because the conservation terms really been misused, and it looks like it does not really mean the meaning it's supposed to mean in the real world. When you speak about carbon, they come to say it is a conservation, but it's actually not a conservation. It is a business kind of. When you speak about some of the interventions that affect today the pastoralists and the indigenous people in the world, they all speak about the conservation and not conservation. They speak about investments for money. So that's something also need to be really defined well. The second is about the carbon and the other projects. I think there's a need to have a regulatory kind of a structure from these indigenous people to kind of oversee the implementation of this project. And if at all these projects are not healthy to our people, let's have these platforms or a structure that can even have a legal rights to kind of bind that project to operate in that specific place. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike is with you, Ole.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think great discussion. I think for me, I think we need to, what is not coming out, we need to somehow find a way to demystify these struggles, in the sense that it has become a struggle for indigenous people's organizations in the which is not different from NGOs. So the struggle is within NGOs. And to me, so it will look like an issue between impact and NRT. It's not. So we need to find a way of centering the community in the struggle. So it's a community really. So we need to have the communities in the front, on the firing line, because it is them. And to do this, I think to me the one key solution to this is about strengthening collective bargaining for communities, so that we give them the fire that they need. So it's stop being an NGO impact talking about NRT or the conservation. It is about communities talking about what they don't, what is not right. So it is their issue. It's not an issue of NGOs. So I think so. For me, we have a problem within us because we have taken power from the communities. We have taken power from the communities. We are talking on their behalf, and they have their voice. So we need to get back the power to communities and help them advance their own voice.
Thank you so much, Ole Kaunga, for that. I think that's a really important point, because also if the real voices are missing, we cannot be the representative as organization. And it's only by the community themselves having the ability to articulate those rights. And our role probably is more to play the facilitation to make that happen and provide the right information, provide the information they need, and also to be able to position them to better be able to engage. So, and I think maybe that's the question we need to ask ourselves, whether we are doing very well in that front or otherwise. Kindly allow me to move to the next presentations, because your points are likely, kindly forgive me, your point is likely to find space or room in the next presentation. So kindly hold on. Allow presentation group number 1. Would you kindly take the stage to make your presentation? And the group followed by group number, what number would that be? Number 4. So kindly queue up, be ready to make the presentation. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I represent group number 1, and our group was composed of 3 countries: Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. The majorities were Kenya. And they raised quite a lot of issues around land tenure, security, and land rights in those countries that I have mentioned. If we go to slide number 1, I will want to connect to what Ole Kaunga has reiterated at the end of his remarks. In terms of land tenure and land right in the countries that I have said, we face similar issues. It's only in the difference between the policy and the legal context in which those issues find themselves. But indigenous people face the same problems across the region. And a key issue there is the lack of political goodwill. Sorry for the misspell there. The key issue there is our politicians are not there to support because of already stereotype around NGOs, as Ole indicated. It is seen as an NGO agenda rather than the people's agenda on the ground. Rather than marketing the indigenous people's problems, we market our own problems. And that really will not be able to take us anywhere. But the moment we realize this and start putting the people in front of the land tenure and land rights agenda, I believe politicians will start hearing those things and be able to take action, because those are the people that put them into power. So the political issues around those countries that I have mentioned is the fact that more often than not, indigenous people needs in terms of land rights are not taken into consideration, and more often you will find that the investment and commercial interests are the ones that are given priority. And for that reason, you will realize that most of these injustices you see around emerge from the historical marginalization of indigenous people in those countries that are represented for our group. And there is no difference when it comes to dispossession. As I said, it's only the context of dispossession and displacement. And the tactics that they are using is the laws are clear in terms of land registration, land ownership, and land use systems within those communities. But when it comes to registration, you'll find that the authorities will play delay tactics to allow indigenous people to be able to acquire their land and use it communally. Key to that is because the moment you register that land and it becomes legal to the communities, it will be difficult in some of the countries like Kenya. I am not very sure about Uganda, but also in Tanzania, though sometimes laws are not followed because there is no rule of law, to take that land back to the government unless they use force. So from that issue, we realized that there are some things that we can do to resolve them. And one of them is to organize and engage political leaders. And I love what one of the professors who was in our group indicated. His organization has been able to bring political leaders, executive leaders, to meet with indigenous people so that they can be able to access the rights they want in terms of securing their land tenure. And I believe that engagement will be able to support and put people at the front of the struggles to ensure land rights are provided to the people. Next slide, please. Another issue is policy and legal framework for registration of community land. We have realized that the legal framework sometimes are helpful together with the policies on the ground. But how are they being enforced to ensure that we have indigenous people land tenure security? We have come to realize that registration becomes difficult because of the constraints that are put there. You may find that there are lengthy procedures to be able to register land, but also the government and authority play delay tactics to ensure that communities are discouraged from registering their land. What are the solutions there? Given the technical expertise that are in civil society organizations, we will want civil society organizations to prioritize the tenure rights of indigenous communities by making sure that they provide the technical support for them to be able to engage and utilize the policy and legal framework in place to be able to resolve the registration problem that they are facing. Next slide, please. Land valuation was another issue that came in. And more often than not, we are trying to play around the market and private perspective of land valuation. When it comes to looking at the market perspective of land valuation, you'll find that the market has a price for land. But when it comes to private indigenous community land, there are things that are not part of the valuation process or criteria for valuation of land. And that impinge on the cultural, traditional, and communal rights in terms of land use among indigenous people. For them, they don't look land as, the market will look at a bare land. So when you're compensated based on what you have invested in the land. But when you look at the land of indigenous people, most of them will have trees, most of those trees, indigenous trees and grass. The market value does not see that as something that is valuable. So we are looking at a point whereby these issues can be addressed to be able to value the grass, to value the cultural aspects attached to the land so that the market value of that land can be uplifted. So to resolve that issue, we see that there is a need
to engage with the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches of the government, to involving civil society to advocate for the value of land from an indigenous perspective, rather than only looking from the market value of which is not attached to the indigenous people's ways of life. Next slide, please. Land use conflicts, again, it's the same happening across the 3 countries that we have been able to see. And particular issue there comes around dispute over land ownership and land grabbing and competition for resources. And this is happening because there is no proper land tenure systems within those areas. And solution for that is to strengthen those systems, which are already embedded in the policy and legal framework, and improve governance, land governance, among other things, to ensure that these conflicts are resolved within the mechanism that exists at local and maybe national level. Thank you very much.
Hey, can you give them a round of applause for that good presentation? Members, could you confirm that this is a true representation of your discussion? Yes? 100%. Thank you very much. Before we take the next presentation, are other members having any immediate burning issue as far as this presentation is concerned? Please don't, you should not be a member of the group. Okay. Let me allow 3 interventions at this stage, then we move to the next one. Let me start with Basiru, then Kobe, then I come to you, Ika.
The mic? Okay. Thank you very much, this group, for this wonderful presentation. I know it's on land, right? So land issue is very difficult to understand. But looking at your proposal, at your solutions, I don't know whether we can come back to whether we can present the slides here so that when we are talking, we know what we are talking, especially maybe the last slide. The solutions that you are proposing, I don't know who are you addressing to? Because I feel, for example, when you say strengthen land tenure laws, who should strengthen the land tenure laws? We as indigenous people, do we have the power to strengthen the land tenure laws, or do we advocate for the strengthening of land tenure laws? So I think I maybe lose I don't know whether you can present, you can put it back.
It's okay, just continue, because the point is well known,
so
and
I think,
it ties to the other presentations.
Okay, so I think we should, our solution should be who are they addressing to and who is responsible of doing what. What is in our power? Like we indigenous people, we have that power to influence, we have that power to do advocacy. And like, for example, one of the proposed solution was community engagement that is within our reach. But those that are not within our reach, what should we do? Thank you so much. And also thank you again for the wonderful presentation.
Pass the mic to please.
Thank you very much. Sometimes I think it's about the process, how the presenters made the presentation. When you mentioned that this group was only talking about Loliondo, it was talking about Marsabit and Karamoja. Now that Ogiego are not there, now that the person from Cameroon was not there, who will represent them in that group? So I think you might need to expand in the report that this group or this information foresees, it was representing all of us who are not in that group. Because land tenure is something very critical, and it's affecting whoever was not there because you are representing us. So sometime when you are in a group, that's why I'm talking about the process. Because a process can interfere with everything else. Thank you.
And that's a point of clarification, because remember the assignment was we put our issues, our identity aside in terms of geographies and where we come from. and take the challenge at hand and dissect it and get the solutions and make clear propositions. So the mentioning of who participated, probably these ones were also generous in terms of who sat in those conversations, which is not wrong. I think we can manage it under the reporting part. But importantly is to ensure that the information that has been shared here has not necessarily missed out the opportunity to capture the issue that may be specific to you. We don't need to mention that this is my case, another one, this is my case, but how are these thematic aspects interacting with the challenges that you have, but also what are the propositions in terms of the solutions. So apologies, Bwana Kobei, if at all this is how you feel. But
no, I think it's a feeling for everybody.
Okay.
Because even here in Nanyuki, there is a big problem in Laikipia.
Yes.
And they were not in that group. Because
So-
you should have said about the fencing problem, might be.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let me also clarify this. As I take note of this issue and recognize the importance, let's also be aware and take the moment to contribute and see what is it that has not been captured. Because as I say, this is about all of us. It's not specific to any group. It is about the issues that we have been able to consolidate. And the fact that we were able to divide into different groups, of course you would not have been able to participate in all the groups. You only could make yourself present in one. But as they present here, the question is that presentation also representative of the situation or the issues that you find important, regardless of your geography? If the answer is yes, we are good. If there's anything missing, it's the reason we are opening this floor, so that you have a moment also to add your voice, to be able to add your new ideas or new issues or innovations that we need to take into account. So please don't feel left out. Don't feel that this was only specific to those who sat there. This is the moment that we must build this, ensuring that all the points captured here are truly representative of what has been said. Do you still want to say your point, Anne? Okay, can you pass the mic? It's very close by Mr. Lekaunga there.
Yes. Yeah, I totally understand, because it was actually the first statement, so I saw it and I'm like, wait, this is not okay. But those were just examples. You see, those are just 3 cases, and we are like 20 of us, and everyone has had a case. So please, those were just examples. I'm sorry if it came out otherwise, because it actually came out otherwise, because they were not indicated as example. But please, those are just examples, and if we don't need those kind of examples just to be more representative, we'll have them out. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Ekal, and then we go to Dida.
Thank you for the presentation. I think the issue for me is valuation. So for some of us, both research scholars and communities, as the prescription of valuation and indigenous valuation. So I think there's more work that needs to go into it. Perhaps solutions include research and continuously building research so that it occupies the academic spaces, because if you look at a company, its value goes up. But then we want compensation values based on the now. Yet identity, sense of belonging is something that goes on for years and generations, especially identity. And so it is important for us to not fall into the trap of the capital spaces that we are fighting. So what does valuation look like in the traditional indigenous spaces, so that we don't start to use those terms that then put us in this trap. And because yes, you find that we say valuation and it's the now, but then that company value goes up. So what is equity from the indigenous perspective, rather than just valuation for compensation?
Very correct point. Bwana Dida.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted also to interject into that valuation thing. I think there's already valuation study that was done, and the way it's done, everybody's not happy with it. But there's one key question that we need to ask ourselves. Why is the value of land, when it comes to, from pastoralist perspective, is made to be low when it comes to carbon trading, when it comes to conservation trading, when it comes to solar trading? The value is very high. And we need to ask ourselves who is valuing and valuing it for who, so that we can start discussing it from that perspective. And we can also look at it from their own point of view. If they don't want to listen to our view, because their view is trading, and when it comes to conservation trading, the value is high. When it comes to carbon and solar and everything, and wind also, so that we can also try to look at it from that perspective. And also, when the presentation started with power dynamics, and that we don't have the power, we need also to rethink where that power is and where our power is. Because most of the time, the people who discuss these things from profit perspective are the people who are on the table. And these people are the investor and the government most of the time. And our government is not also very representative of our view and also of our prioritization. So then let's ask ourselves, where is also the power?
Thank you.
The power is in the land. The power is in the carbon. The power is in the conservation. And the power is in the solar. And most of these things is also in our hands. If you think all the land belongs to us and most of those things happens on the land, then we start thinking of how can we be on that table to be able to also be a partner.
Sure.
And most of the time also when that opportunities come, the way they always said, we may find our civil society organization sitting on that power on our behalf instead of us sitting on that table. And because there are also funding institutions within our midst here, how can they help the communities to be on that table, not the civil society organizations?
So what is your recommendation?
My recommendation is that we focus more on the community. And the civil society organizations, they have been floating somewhere for a long, long time and behaving like barriers and bridges. But when most of the time we also look at it, we are more like a barrier than a bridge. So we give that space.
I think the point has been well articulated and it's well highlighted. I would want to close this intervention at this stage. Colleagues, you'll still have time to come back to this in one way or the other. Let's allow the next group. This will be group number 4. Group number 4. And number 5, they will follow in that order, and then we'll open up for a more time for further interventions. As I said, these issues are interrelated. Whether you're talking about valuation, is about the land that does, conservation happens, the land that carbon happens, the land that everything, so they're all intertwined. So let's hear from group number 4. Kindly take the floor. Can we give a round of applause as Madame makes her way up here? Hey, can we have that applause, please, before she gets here? Let's run the claps. And she'll have a 5 minutes presentation before we can...
Good morning, everybody. Maybe you could increase the font size. I can't see it when I'm this side. Oh, sawa. Maybe. Okay, I can see. Sawa. Okay. At least here. It's fine. Okay, ours was this is group 4, and ours was on green energy transition. The key issues that we looked at was 1, the lack of free consent, prior consent. Okay, we looked at it like when these investors come around, they don't seek the consent of the people. They just go to the field and they implement whatever they are doing. And then the other one was the catch-22 of the global agenda and local costs. It means that there is no consideration of the costs towards these people. For example, we looked at if a transition line is passing through the land of the communities, it doesn't benefit even the local people, and it looks like it's not right for them. And then we all look at the global agenda. We are looking towards the agenda of the investors. We are not looking at the needs of our communities. And then the other one was, and then we go to the second one. What are your proposed solutions to the critical issues listed above? One is we need continuous registration of the land. And then we need a plan in place, especially the investment plan. And then building expertise among IPS on energy technology is crucial. We ourselves need the techniques. We need the skills, we need the knowledge. There's no need of bringing outside people to do what we, the local IPs, can do. Then strengthening community organization is a key strategy. We need to strengthen the communities, bring them on board, than leaving them behind. Then collective advocacy on FPICs that informs local, regional, and global processes. Next. The priority support that we need: technical support to understand the intersection of work we are engaged in. Then this community exchange to build collective power. Take us out there, take us to learn so that we can come and replicate what we have learned from other communities. Fellowships for young people. Let's develop fellowships so that our local people can learn. By the time they come back, they are able to replicate, or they are able to teach the communities, build the capacity of the local people for continuity. And then we also have a pool of experts within us. And then we need to prepare for future investments, which we can replicate in our areas. Then we should also be able to legislate. And then we need to protect our land. Then we need to develop capacity of stakeholders. Thank you very much. Sorry. Okay, thank you. I want to introduce my members. Maybe they could stand up to be seen. They are there. Thank you. The person who was presenting is called Christine from Uganda.
Can you give them a round of applause again? Yeah, energy transition. Without land, there'll be no space, right? And the space required, whether it's on the sky or whatever, has a spatial component. So our land rights sits at the core of making that or enabling that to happen. The issues of exclusions are real. And we know very well that even for some of the mega projects on solar, have serious questions about the extent to which communities have been included, the FP question, but also the marginalization and exclusion, including opportunities to benefit from the same resource, what they're working on. Let's go to our next group before we open it up for questions. This will be group number 5. Are you ready? Okay, we have our able presenter coming up. Can we give her a round of applause as she comes? She will have 5 minutes to make the presentation. Welcome. Okay.
Good morning. Let me introduce my group members, so maybe they can just stand up and wave. Yes, so those are the representatives of Group 5. So Group 5, we were looking at livelihood and intergenerational leadership. And of course, there was a number of issues that were coming up from this particular group in discussion. And one of them, as the key priority issues that we looked at, is poverty is one of the key issues affecting livelihoods. And that results from, of course, climate change, which causes severe drought, which results to death of livestock and crops in a number of communities, in a number of regions. And another one was on, of course, the negative perception on pastoralism and agriculture by young people. That really came out that is actually an issue when it comes to livelihoods and, of course, supporting livelihoods. And, of course, we have another one is on inadequate knowledge and capacity on sustainable agricultural systems and, of course, rangeland management practices. So that was an issue and a gap that came up in our group. And, of course, there's full dependence on pastoralism as a livelihood system. It came out that we need to try and link pastoralism to other livelihood systems as well for sustainability and, of course, for improving food security in the pastoral areas. And, of course, there's pastoral narratives such as cattle complex and, of course, the certification threat. We all know that the narrative that is coming up that pastoralism is a threat to, of course, leads to desertification and climate change. When our presenters here on the panelists were talking about cattle resulting to contributing much more on methane. So that is one of the issues that came out from our group. And of course, there's land-related issues that is also people have been talking about pushing forward for community land registration and recognition of pastoral lands. So, of course, there's land grabbing. Those includes, I mean, for example, we have user access and, of course, ownership rights. So another one was on the restricted mobility and transboundary pastoralism. So that was a very key issue that came out from our group that is linked to livelihoods. And of course, there's gender-related issues and social inclusion that, of course, we need to balance. We need to balance couple responsibility vis-a-vis the needs of the young people. That is also something an issue that came up from our group. And of course, there's lack of proper storage systems for feeds. So that was an issue and a gap that is linked to livelihoods from our group 5 presentation. Next slide, please. Of course, our proposed solutions, as we mentioned, there's need for women empowerment on income generating activities. And of course, such activities like we saw what the women in Itwala were doing. Of course, we are talking about basket weaving and breeding and also other income generating activities. And of course, there's capacity building on alternative livelihood systems, such as beekeeping, and of course, we have the climate smart agriculture that includes kitchen gardens, and of course, the concept that is coming up on agroecology. That is something that is really important that we might want to consider. And also value addition and livestock value chain for increased income in the regions. That is also a solution that we looked at in our group. And of course, there is need for civic education and capacity building to educate young people on the importance of preserving culture and also rearing livestock and agriculture. So, as I mentioned, there's negative perception on agriculture by the young people, so we call for civic education. And of course, more alternative livelihood systems, that is also something that I've mentioned. Of course, we have having a financial base to support young people. Of course, setting aside funds to support livelihoods for women and of course, young people, that is also something that came up in our group. And finally, we need vocational trainings and colleges. With that, we can be able to, of course, enhance their capacity to engage more on pastoral systems, pastoral opportunities that are existing, and also we can also be able to take up the leadership that we of course we are looking at by the end of it all. So slide number 3, please. And our priority areas of support, of course, we saw the need to create livelihood funds for indigenous peoples. That is also including women and youth. And also, we need to have a curriculum on pastoralism and livelihoods. That was a call to have pastoralism as part of the subjects that are being taught in school. That if we can be able to work together to ensure that we have pastoralism as part of curriculum, that will actually be a good way to go. And also, we need to have summer school on pastoralism for nurturing young leaders. And of course, we know there's summer school on climate change, but there was a call to have one on pastoralism so that we can be able to, of course, train them and see how they can be able to take up the leadership roles. And of course, there's a call for fellowship and mentorship programs still on livelihoods and pastoralism. We need to have more fellowship programs that are addressed towards livelihoods and pastoralism. And of course, we need to have indigenous peoples-led funding. We need to have more fund go to indigenous people. And of course, they need capacity building and institutional strengthening. We have so many institutions, but of course, we need capacity in order to be able to take up.
Is around the question of land up to now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bwana Jason. And I would want to challenge you, because of your strategic space where you sit, that you consider this point you've put across very seriously, to coordinate to see whether we are able to utilize the connection you have to start building up towards achieving this. Thank you so much. Okay, I see Ole Kaunga, but we also had a hand up here from the gentleman. If you could kindly pass the mic before we come to Ole, and then we'll come to the lady. I'll have to manage the opportunities provided here, so if I don't give you the chance, please you'll forgive me. Yes, please.
Yeah, mine is on livelihoods and intergenerational leadership. As indigenous peoples, our livelihood is mainly livestock, and pastoralism is on the verge of extinction. It has been ruined by land use practices incompatible with the nomadism, the dwindling livestock population, and also rangeland degradation. and the young people have explicitly detached themselves from the livestock, from the pastoralism occupation. They have been taken away by the formal education system, which they are not also benefiting from the mainstream education benefits. They have left the pastoralism. They are not putting. They are not benefiting much also from the formal education. They are just hanging in between. As much as our elders are clinging to pastoralism, the young generation have completely left the livestock rearing, the inherent livestock rearing livelihood, and are just hanging.
What is the item you'd want?
As much as we embrace formal education, our young generation should also embrace our cultures and our way of life, so that even those who drop in between can have some other life skills that will boost their livelihoods.
Thank you. Point taken. Can we get the next presenter? I think pass the mic to Ole.
Thank you very much for the contribution by Moku. But I think I think we need to also sometimes strategize and also see what we can use existing information. There have been a number of rulings in Kenyan courts where the word indigenous peoples have been applied, especially the Ugie case. And I think we can, and also I think as in Kenya, the practice comes before policy. Kenya has used in short documentation. Kenya government have used indigenous peoples several, especially in the indigenous peoples framework when reporting to donors, World Bank, and all that. If you look, for instance, just the indigenous peoples planning framework for the total war against HIV/AIDS that was done in 2010, the document from the government of Kenya refers to indigenous peoples as defined in the UN documentation. So we have been applying the word indigenous peoples in Kenya, even right now. So that's a positive development. We need to twist that and now hold a Kenyan government accountable because they are using it in official documentation. And to me, we are so much progressive in this, and I think that's a positive development. The parliamentarians will not help us. They have not helped us even having a simple policy on pastoralism. So for me, that's not a way to go. We can't win anything in that direction for the last, because it was not created for that purpose. Let's try to organize another different strategy.
Point taken. Let's pass the mic. So the strategy needs to be well crafted and maybe reflecting on what is it that we've not been doing right to ensure that we can be able to maximize the opportunity to get the best outcome. So no objection. Madam, please proceed.
Okay, I have something that I wanted to add on the key issues that they mentioned in their presentation. One, they said that we have negative perspective on agriculture and pastoralism by young youths, but I think we also need to empower our women on our own things that we do, especially our beads and the culture, the indigenous knowledge that we usually have at our indigenous people at home, because it's also something that is going, it's diminishing. So apart from agriculture and what they mentioned on another lively, sustainable, how are we also going to do on empowering our indigenous knowledge and indigenous perspective on our items like beads and other things? Those are something else we need to put in place. Thank you.
Yes, pass the mic to the lady close to you.
Thank you. Mine is in relation to energy. I just want to give an example of a place called Bubisa where we have so many investors and they are suing each other, on other people's land, claiming that who has come first. And to solve this problem, because we have been talking of community taking lead in their own initiative, my proposal is, why don't we help communities to register a localized energy power and also help them to be in the list of approved power projects? And thirdly, link them to the financiers, because the same investors are getting funding from financiers. Why not a localized energy power from Marsabit? Thank you.
Thank you so much. The gentleman at the corner had his hand up a while ago. And I think the last person I'm going to give would also be him, right? And kindly, if you could be very brief, because we've crossed the boundaries of time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was in group 4, and one of the things that came out very very clearly that I need to see how to come out of it is the fact that we are always on catch up. we learned that Kenya has already actually passed what they call the Kenya Energy Transition Investment Plan, already in place, and we are talking about how to engage when the plan is already there. So one of the things that we pointed out in the group is we become proactive, other than just coming out late to discuss what probably already discussed. And the pointed out is what is probably what is in the plan already that government has already launched. When we are discussing that how do we engage, and government has already pointed out that. So basically, I think as a group, we pointed out that we need really to be very, very proactive in these matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you? Yes, you already have the mic. You are the last speaker.
Yeah, I'm very ready. Thank you. And I'm very brief and direct. I think one thing that we have to acknowledge is this: transition to green energy is a necessity. It's something that is very important for global world and even ourselves. How it is done is what really matters here. So just transition is what we really need to emphasize. And one other thing that is important is in our setup, where we have green energy trying to replace our form of livelihood is the biggest danger, taking our land and displacing people. But there are possibilities of coexistence. And there's a report that I happen to be part of the authors that I can share, which details some of these issues. So we have to look at coexistence and benefits for the local community. And thirdly, there's human rights issue at the center of all this. Business and human rights principles needs to be applied, and there are quite varied ones that are out there. UN RIP, of course, has already been mentioned. On the livelihood aspect, I was a little bit worried about some of the terms and how they are used, and sometimes you have to be very careful on some of these things that can be used against us. For instance, Keto Complex and desertification are narratives against pastoralism. They are not pastoralist narratives. I don't know whether it was just a matter of writing it out. And when you talk about desertification, the are narratives that are used against us. So we have to be very careful on some of these terms and how we use it, even as we come up with these solutions that we talk about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for your input and your contribution. And let's have a round of applause recognizing our great work that we've done and presented here. These points cannot be fully exhausted, and we can only manage to do what is possible at this point. But before we get direction for what happens next, I would want to pass this moment to Casey Box, so you can be able to maybe give a little brief about your own reflection about this session, and maybe make any top up that you would want to do.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Moderator. Before I begin, I want to talk about a great friend and colleague who's been at the Christensen Fund longer than any other team member at the Christensen Fund. And I've watched this man advocate that we need to put more resources into Kenya, more resources into East Africa, and now Pan-Africa. And without this man, this meeting would not be possible. So please join me as we quickly come to a close in congratulating Hassan Roba for all of his leadership and his work.
We are not yet done, Casey, so don't conclude the meeting yet.
That's not concluded.
Yes, please.
So at the Christensen Fund, Hassan and I's main two roles are to process grants to each of your organizations, which we're honored to do. And the second one is to advocate on the behalf of indigenous people's rights within philanthropy and on the behalf of each of your organizations to try and tell other donors that they should support you. And I want to tell a brief story of how we go beyond our grant dollars to do this. It was 2022 in Montreal. It was my first time in Montreal. It was very cold. I don't recommend it in the winter. And there was a man from the Congo Basin who kept asking me for a meeting. And I told this man, his name was Joseph. I said, I don't have any money, Joseph. I'm so sorry. I have no more money. He said, I don't want your money. I don't care about your money. He said, just sit down with me. So I met him in a hotel lobby. We sat down. This is December. Remember this. And he showed me this concept note. And he said, Casey, I want to have the first ever women's forum in the Congo Basin. I said, this sounds fantastic. I was shocked that this would be the first women's forum in the Congo Basin. I said, what do you want? He said, help me mobilize the donors. And so in a matter of weeks, we had the Packard Foundation, Niatero, Foundation, Rewild, and I'm probably forgetting a few others that supported this meeting. And by the end of January, they had 501c3 equivalency, and it was the first time that they ever had direct funding to their organization. And that was Repeliac. They did an amazing job. And that is a good example of how we can work together to mobilize donors to support your work and your initiatives. So I want to show you, just give you two tips, and I apologize if you already know these. This website is called guidestart.org. And any NGO that is based in the United States is legally obligated to report to the US government on all their funding. They have to report how much their employees get paid, where their funds come from, and where they put their money. And they have to put which regions they put their money and which organizations they give it to. And so when I used to run an NGO, this website was absolutely critical to me. I would tell my staff and team members, take 2 hours every day. Let's think about all the NGOs that we dream to be. Let's think about all the NGOs that work like us, maybe kind of like us, because we can look up their organizations and get more information. So it's totally free. I really recommend that you take a look at it. You can look up your work. So put us to work, and we'll try and find you additional funding. In the interest of time, I'm going to be very brief. And there's one other website that I want to show you that you're probably aware of. It's linkedin.com. And I think in kind of the past 2 years, in my opinion, this has become the biggest platform for donors to make connections, to communicate, and to learn about different subjects and work. So if you personally don't have a presence on LinkedIn, or your organization doesn't have a presence on LinkedIn, I would highly recommend you do so. The last thing I'll say is the Christensen Fund is a small foundation, I think, but we still have a presence, and we're investing more in our communications. We're trying to do newsletters, we're trying to do webinars, we're trying to promote all of our partners' work. So feel free to reach out to us and say, hey, we just had this important meeting, would you write an article about it? Or would you put it on your social media? We're happy to do that for you. That is really easy for us to do, and it's something that we're investing more in because we think, you know, our power to advocate with other donors is why we're here. Otherwise, we would not exist as a foundation. And not to put somebody on the spot, but Ekal, we've talked about these issues about advocating in these spaces, the problems with philanthropy. You know, indigenous rights is really hard. And we know that indigenous rights is at the intersection of every issue. Women's rights, the environment, biodiversity, climate change, you name it, land rights. And often we walk in these spaces and we feel a bit alienated. And we kind of have to transform a little bit, like we're in a movie, and say, you know what, when you're talking about tenure rights, you should be thinking about indigenous peoples. When you're talking about women's rights, you should be thinking about indigenous peoples. And I don't know if Ekal, if you want to just, you're really good at summing things up, but I don't know if there's something you want to add to that as a recent board member on the Christensen Fund.
Thanks. Thanks, Casey. Is it working? Is it working? Thanks, Casey. Yes, again, I will join Casey in recognizing Dr. Hassan's role in not only shaping the resources and pushing for more resources to the region, but just really expanding and creating the visibility. As many of you who've been in the space advocating for indigenous rights, you know the space is really occupied by Latin America, Central America, and Asia. And the indigeneity, we find ourselves constantly fighting for the indigeneity in the continent. And having him not only push for that, but also the work that has come from the leadership of the Christensen Fund to ensure that more indigenous voices can inform and shape the Christensen Fund work and engagement, not only as a philanthropist, but also in advocating for more resources to come to the region. But really pushing on what Casey is saying, I think our biggest challenge, Nole Kaunga, Kobe and I have had this discussion for the longest time, is how do we build the collective? The resources go to Latin America, to Central America, to Asia, because of the collective. I think as Shoba said earlier, individual organizations' work is great, but if we don't build a collective to really not only push the policy work, but also pull the resources in, as Repelak, Basiru and Co and Joseph and others are working towards, we will continue to get little resources that cannot attract bigger resources to give the communities. Because if you find the resources you get, you're struggling to, divide it between communities, self-determination and work, but also operating the institutions. So how do we start to build those collectives? How do we start to organize together so that we learn from Repelak and others, from IPAS, from Pawanka, from all this Nusantara and others who are really looking for more resources to come to the ground. So again, I will applaud Hassan's work, but just to urge us that in this space, as Simon was trying to hint at us, let's look beyond our organizations and our territories to look across the indigenous lands and territories and how we build collective, not only to advocate, but to also look for the resources that can advocate against in the global space for more resources to come to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Casey, and the intervention by Ekal. I think we need to appreciate the opportunity that the Christensen Fund has offered us for them to be our ambassadors. Not just what they can be able to get from their own basket, but also engaging other donors and partners. And this, they have the strategic opportunity and ability to make this kind of engagement, because sometimes we even don't know who these philanthropists are. We don't know where exactly they meet and how they engage. So having an ambassador of this kind is an opportunity for us to send them with core messages, to be very clear on our asks. And I want to appreciate that, of course, the issue of the mechanisms in place, and it was mentioned here, the issues of looking at livelihood funds for pastoralists. We've mentioned about indigenous peoples-led funding, how that will be important, why this is important, maybe even for institutional development as indigenous people. We've talked about also strengthening the capacity of local entities, the indigenous people themselves, be able to articulate, to be able to take on the challenges. Do we have a mechanism to provide those funding? Do we have the funding to be able to make that happen? We need to be really clear on what message, what are our asks in this case. And as we reflect about this, there are a few more points that we need to reflect on. And I like what Ekal talked about, collective. The issue of how we organize, how we communicate, how we advocate, how we influence has also been mentioned in the presentation here. And I'm just focusing on what really, some of the binding factors, that connects us. Recognizing, of course, each of the geographies, each of the countries, each of the communities that we work are also very unique. We've also talked about the issue of documentation and research. How best are we communicating? How best are we using, for example, the social media? Thanks also for pointing us to the power of the LinkedIn. I don't think how many of us probably appreciate that. I know our colleagues probably will show us here, even with the photos and what has been taken here, it's just to scan a QR code that will be on the screen here shortly, and we'll be able to have all the information that has been posted there. You know, apart from that, there are also the links that you've shown us, how can we be able to engage and interact with the spaces where we can be able to get resources. So as indigenous people, that communication and documentation is key, but also putting our voices where it's supposed to be. Because if we allow others to represent us, information can be distorted. So how do we ensure that actually we are communicating what we need to communicate? The question then of where do we communicate, with whom do we engage? And that comes to the question about opportunities to advocate, opportunities to be able to influence policies, opportunities to be with who is supposed to listen to those voices in different spaces, at the national level, at the regional level, as well as at the global level. The question then, do we have the capacity to engage? You know, and how do we strengthen that capacity from what has been mentioned by Margaret in terms of women capacity, women issues, specific gender-related issues. Indigenous people's issues are core, but also within the indigenous people, we don't just treat them as a universal group. They are young people within the group. They are women within the group. They are older, you know, men and women within the group. How do we take care of that, and how are we able to provide for that in our work? The networking and movement building, I think I've talked about in terms of organizing, in terms of experts that can be brought on board. This can be tapped directly from either existing networks or build new expertise that are also able to form networks and make themselves available across the region in Africa to provide this support whenever this is needed. And as I said, these are just some of the elements that will constitute our core reflection after this session. And I would like to ask us, just as a matter of